about to listen to Speak Up, Show Up, Lead, the podcast, where we speak our truth, show up anyway, and lead from the front. Follow me. Let's go. Welcome to another episode of Speak Up, Show Up, Lead podcast. This episode is a Leadership Live edition, and I'm here with Chris Pinkowski. Don't forget to go to Amazon.com and check out Speak Up, Show Up, Lead, the book. It's worth it. Check it out. Chris, how you doing today?
Doing great, JJ. How are you?
Man, it's Saturday. I'm up early. I have a veterans coffee connection this morning, and so I think it's going to be a good day.
Awesome.
Yeah. What about you?
Dude, I got to do some work outside. So we had a new fence installed this summer. 6 foot, cedar fence around the whole back of our house. And our dog broke through 3 of the slots, I guess 2 days ago. So I had to go to the fence company and get some matching slats. And so I'll be fixing my brand new freaking fence today.
Animals are wonderful, but they definitely do some things that make you want to go, ah!
Exactly.
But it's all good.
Yep.
No, but today we get to talk about something that's a little bit different than normal, but not really different, because I bet you we still bring up a lot of the same stuff. But we're going to talk about leading through conflict. What comments do you have about leading through conflict? Because I know that you've done a little bit of that.
I have. I guess the way that I would get us started, or my initial comment, is that I know from my own experience that most people are uncomfortable with conflict, and you're not going to get very far in a leadership position if you can't master how to get through conflict, how to lead through conflict in a way that is productive for everybody.
Yeah. Well, and there's more types of conflict, right? There can be a confrontation between 2 people. There can be a conflict where, all hell just broke loose at work. I mean, there are many different categories of conflict. And so, it doesn't really matter which category it falls into. If you can't, well, it's your job as the leader in the organization to manage that and not be the one that adds to the problem. I mean, if you meet that level of frustration in the conflict with everybody else's level of frustration, because usually it happens, then do you think that conflict is going to get easier to deal with or harder to deal with?
No.
It'll turn into chaos.
It does. Yeah. Every time.
Every single time. And it doesn't matter if you're dealing with one-on-one stuff or if it's just an overall work issue. So that's something to consider.
Yeah. And you bring up a good point, JJ, that conflict comes in many shapes and forms. But it's our job as leaders to not back down from any of them, right? Know how to handle them. I think that a common misperception that people have about conflict is that when conflict arises, I need to jump in and get in someone's face, and I need to raise my voice, and I need to change the rhythm of how I'm speaking. And that's not always the case. Sometimes it's the case, but not always. And conflict can be handled very professionally. It can be handled without raising voices. It could be done in such a way that everyone kind of maybe feels the tension, but walks away with oh, all right, that was productive. I think that's the key, right? Is to turn conflict into something productive and then be able to move on.
Agreed. Now, I will say that a lot of times, especially, we deal with actionable leadership advice that can be implemented immediately, right? In this show that we do together. And, I think a problem that a lot of younger leaders have is avoiding the problem altogether. Well, I mean, have you ever heard the saying, things will just work themselves out?
Yes.
And does that ever happen?
Yeah. No.
No. So I mean, teams and projects, they don't fall apart because of the conflict itself. I think they probably fall apart more because people avoid it. I mean, and then it snowballs into things like resentment and distrust and division, and then that's where the chaos starts to ensue. And so when you avoid the problem just gets worse. And just like when you avoid a problem yourself and you stuff all your issues down, what happens when it gets to the point where you can't handle it anymore? Well, even you get a little bit crazy. So what makes you think anything different is going to happen at work?
Exactly.
Yeah.
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 It's you can't just ignore the conflict and hope that it works itself out
No.
because it's
No.
not going to happen.
Nope.
And if it does happen, then you have no say in the outcome of that conflict, and it could result in something that's even worse for you. It could be, worse for you mentally, like, oh, I rolled over and now I have to do this because I didn't play a part in coming up with a solution. Um, it could result in a lot of different things that are negative if you just kind of let let it play its course.
Yeah. Well, and then there's the next hard part for new leaders, right? And that's, instead of avoiding it, well, first of all, you can't. I mean, when you're in a leadership position, everyone is looking at you. Oh my gosh, everything's going wrong. Um, Chris, what do I do? Chris, what's the next steps? Does the leadership have a plan for this? What's the next thing? What's going to happen? And so, if you could avoid it and say, I need to go leave and hide in my office and hide that by saying that I'm going to talk to the rest of the leadership about this and see what we can do, or you can do the hard thing, which is do something about it. And the next step is to be careful what comes out of your mouth next.
Hmm.
And when things are a little bit chaotic, or tense, because this is conflict, right? Then, you know, gosh, be careful what comes out of your mouth. What's the best way to say this? And maybe you can interrupt me and do it more eloquently. But you gotta make sure that you are not spouting off weird platitudes, or you can fake the funk to a certain point, but you don't want to start lying about what the solution is. And you want to make sure that you're not way up here when everybody else is way up here. I mean, you got to be really careful what words come out of your mouth. But
Yeah.
what you don't have to worry about is course correcting. Because if you go out there and you're like, you know what, let's do this, and we're gonna see if this solves the problem. If it's wrong, guess what? That's okay.
Right.
Pay attention, monitor it, and if there's another course correction that needs to happen during the execution of whatever you decide to do to fix the problem, then implement that.
Yes. Yeah. It is important. I always like to say to people, and I like to, you know, do this myself, is before you say anything, just take a deep breath, right? And run it through your head first. If you can imagine yourself on the other side of the table, right, or the other side of the screen, wherever it is, what would you want to hear in a situation like this? Now, put on your leadership hat and deliver the message in a way that you would want to hear it. And it's got to come across in a genuine way. Um, and here's the other thing: people are looking to you as the leader to have answers. If you don't have an answer, it is okay to say, you know what, I'll get back to you on this. That cannot be your go to.
Yep.
I think that's one of the big things you kind of alluded to it a few minutes ago is it's become so typical where it's like, well, let me go talk to the rest of the team and we'll work something out. And you know what? That has to be almost your last resort, is
Yeah.
to leave the conflict to go collaborate with other people who are not part of the conflict necessarily. So I think that what's really important is to be able to kind of detach from the situation, not physically, but like mentally detach from it,
Mhm.
to cool down and say, all right, everybody, let's get to the root cause here. Where is this coming from?
Yeah.
So you do a root cause analysis, you do the 5 whys, why are we experiencing this? What's going on? And you engage the people that are part of the conflict to identify the source. And then you say, okay, how do we fix this? You get them to collaborate with you in solving the conflict. And now everybody's got some buy-in. All right, this is how we're going to execute. This is how we're going to move forward. We understand that there's some unknowns here, but we're going to start moving and we'll iterate as we go.
That's I was actually going to mention that next, because that's another model to do it. As a leader, we're not meant to have all the solutions. And first, I want to go ahead and we had a listen or a watcher here that had a comment. I don't know what the second part of what you said was, but let's talk about not overcommitting. Thank you, Terrence, for making
Oh,
that
yeah.
comment. I really appreciate it. Overcommitting, that can mean so many things, and so we don't want to take it out of context. You said don't over, but also don't be maybe indecisive. So I don't know, but I don't know what the second
That's
part of
a
that
fine
means.
line.
It is, yeah. So when you overcommit to something, that I don't know. That's hard, because a leader should be all in. When he says he's got a when he says there's a solution, and especially when things are going crazy, you want to look like you have confidence so that your people aren't second guessing every step that you make along the way. But you're right. You don't want to overcommit to every solution when you don't know what the outcome is going to be, because at the end of the day, if you have to course correct and you're already knee deep in the mud, then if you overcommit into whatever solution that you implement, it's going to be really, really hard to course correct. So there's got to be balance there. But
Yes.
I tap dance. Yep, there you go. You said it. That's a good way to do it. Tap dance. You don't want to, but you don't want to look like you're tap dancing, Terrence.
That's right.
So, but back to what we were saying, there's nothing wrong with bringing the people that are there with you, maybe not every member of the team, but some of the key players to the table, and saying, "Hey, look, this is a problem." Back when we would have logistics issues, whether it was during deployment or not, that's the first thing we would do, is we would get key members of the leadership team and the staff together and say, what should be done about this? We lay out the problem all the way down to a T, and we spell out, maybe a course of action 1, 2, and 3, all the way down to the eaches, and we start figuring out how to execute on the one that seems like the most viable solution. And that's great on so many levels,
Yeah.
because if you have the ability to do that immediately, sometimes chaos doesn't allow for that. But if you have the ability to do that immediately, then not only are you doing something that's going to make a solution that's viable to everybody, but now you give them ownership. You give them the ability to be a part of the plan. Sometimes leaders just have to make a decision and run with it. But a lot of times we need to get our team together and give them ownership in the problem, so that solution is not only going to be executed more efficiently, but they have a say in it too.
Yeah. So you just hit the nail on the head there, JJ, because you have to think about the different levels that could lead to chaos or to conflict. And, if you're level 1, 2, maybe 3, that's the time to gather the team, dive in, right? It's not something serious. Maybe it's something just like kind of bubbling to the surface and people are getting tense or stressed. They're not sure about, what's going on. That's the time to collaborate. But if you're at like level 4, level 5, this is when people are looking to their leader to say, okay, JJ, you do this. Joe Snuffy, I need you to do this. We need to correct an immediate issue right now. We will solve the bigger problem, but let's plug the hole. This is how we're going to do it. And then we'll come back and address whatever the root cause is that made this hole, and we'll put a permanent solution in place.
Correct.
But
Yep.
for now, take charge, lead, get things done so that the boat doesn't sink, and then figure out what caused the hole in the boat in the first place.
Well, and what's interesting is both models really give an opportunity for the rest of your team to take ownership, because when you implement that decisive action right away and you fix the issue, as messy and ugly and as stupid as it may look while you're doing it, it gets done. And so they know that when push comes to shove, Chris is he's gonna come up with something, even if it's coming out of his ass. He's gonna come up with something to fix the problem. But when you come back afterwards and you do that debrief and that AAR, the where you're looking at what went right, what went wrong, what can we do differently, and maybe what's a good training opportunity here so that we can collectively talk about this and make sure nobody does this bad thing in the future, then it's great. But the other one where you bring people together initially, there's another opportunity within that. When you and the rest of your team come together to come up with that solution, and you let them go run with it after they make their plan. You mentioned this earlier on in this discussion, and that's that gives you the ability to step back, analyze the battlefield,
Right.
look and see what's going on. This person said they were going to do this. Did that go well? This person said they were going to do this. Is that going well? It's the least ego driven and the most empowering way to handle a crisis situation at work, a big conflict at work, because it allows you to analyze, how does your team react during conflict?
Yeah.
If you react well during conflict, that doesn't benefit your team at all, except for that quick fix that we talked about before. But if your team can react well during conflict, you built something that's unstoppable. And a lot of organizations don't have the ability to be able to do that. They might in some situations, but if you are constantly taking opportunities where the proverbial shit hits the fan, and you take that as an opportunity to train your team to deal with it themselves, you're going to build something long lasting that you can't just by JJ or Chris just jumping in there and fixing the problem for them every time. Yeah, you can come back and debrief, but if that's your normal way of handling business, you're not teaching anybody anything.
No, it comes back to the old, kind of thought of, if you've got a 10-year-old kid who's coming to you to tie their shoes, then you didn't do a good job early on teaching them to tie their shoes.
Yep.
And then next thing you know, they're going to be 16 years old with a driver's license and still asking you to tie their shoes. So you've got to empower your team. But the one word that you said there, it was on my mind too. It's the magic word, and it's ego. So I think it's super important for leaders to make sure that they're keeping their ego in check during conflict. So it's easy. It tends to be the go-to for a lot of people to blame in a conflict. Oh, well, JJ, you should have been doing this and you dropped the ball and now the shit hit the fan. So you can't place blame, right? I always say we've got to attack the problems, not the people.
Yeah.
Let's figure out what the problem is. Sometimes the problem is a person, right? Let's not sugarcoat this. But you've got to keep your own ego out of it, because you may have made a decision 3 months ago that came to roost and resulted in a problem. So, let's keep our egos in check, subordinate your ego. And again, that allows the team to collaborate, allows you all to come together and, come up with a solution that gets much greater buy-in.
Yeah. I just put up a comment on the screen here while you were talking, Chris, because I think this kind of brings us to our next point. Uh, Terrence mentioned again, and thank you, Terrence, for participating this morning.
Yes.
He said that both the immediate and deliberate action build trust if handled calmly, and at the end, the result fixes the problem. And I completely agree. That
Yep.
is so true. There are times where both are going to be appropriate, but we got to make sure that as long as the problem gets solved, that at the end of the day, that's the most important thing. You're right. So, but there's got to be balance. What you just brought in there was basically the dichotomy, and
Mhm.
there's you have to be able to empower the team to solve the problems, probably sometimes to most of the time, because you don't want to. If they need you, then you failed.
Right. Yeah.
And a lot of people they dwell on this idea that they need to make themselves the most viable solution because their job depends on it. Actually, that's wrong.
Yeah.
You're the most viable solution when your team is unstoppable. Because if you train your team to be able to handle things on their own, it's better. So what it comes down to in both situations, Terrence, is actually the debrief,
Yeah.
the AAR, how that is handled afterwards. It doesn't matter if you go out there and prioritize and task organize on the spot and say, hey, you do this, hey, you do this, hey, you do this, or if they all come to you and say, whoa, 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 this is going on. What do we do to fix this? And you say, well, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? And then let them run after it. Both of those things are super valuable. And you're right. They both have value. But what's the likelihood that if you learn from both of those situations during the debrief that they're not even going to really come to you unless it's worse next time, and
Yeah.
then the next big thing that happens, that they come to you even later, and then that debrief every time, it's going to be shorter, more succinct, but it's also going to be more powerful and more valuable, and you want them to be empowered to handle it themselves, because if you're always in the mix, then you're that's an ego-driven solution, and
Yeah.
you want to take your ego out of it. And I'm not saying, Terrence, that that's what you were trying to say, but I am saying that you really want to train your team to make sure that they're the ones who are able to handle all of these situations instead of you being the one to hop in there all the time.
Yeah. It's the same. I'll go back to the kids situation, right? There are times that as a parent, right? I've got 3 sons, and you just have to say, "You know what, guys? Figure it out. I can't even get involved in this. You figure it out." And sometimes by you walking away, it helps the team to say, "Oh shit. All right. We got to work together. We got to figure this out."
Yep.
Um it's case by case. Everything is case by case, right? But you've got to think about it. If it's me, right? If it's a solution that I or a conflict that I'm dealing with, and here I am, I'm at the C-suite level, and I've got someone who is on the production floor, and there's something happening down there. Those people that are dealing with that know 50 times more than I do about all the ins and outs of what's going on. So I may be able to guide the conversation, but ultimately, those are the subject matter experts who are going to have probably a much better solution. I can come in with the outside the box, like, hey guys, if we thought about this, that, I know we always do steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or any of those steps irrelevant, whatever. Like I can kind of push back and add my comments from afar. But at the end of the day, sometimes it's the people getting it done who would have the most, I guess, relevant input to how to get over that issue and solve the conflict.
Yeah. And you brought up something and you just barely scraped it, but I'm gonna peel off the scab and I'm gonna go deeper into it. Uh, you know, how do you prepare for this before the conflict happens? So, from a culture perspective, how often are everybody listening here? How often do you take your team to the side, members of your team, and say, you mentioned that this was a problem. Well, how would you fix it?
Mhm.
Or maybe bringing all of your team members together at one time or another, even if it's in your little morning brief before they go out on the floor and doing their work, or at the beginning of shift if you work a different shift or whatever the case may be, and problems start coming up, saying, "Do you know how to solve that? What would your solution be?" This is all simple stuff right here.
Yeah.
Or saying, "Well, he didn't have a solution, guys. What's another solution that could potentially, be, solve this problem?" And if you build your culture around them collaborating and them getting the problem solved, and then your little stoplight method changes a little bit, because that green light for them to come to you is most likely going to be that yellow light, and then eventually that stoplight. And then when they come to you with stuff, it's really when shit really does hit the fan. And that's what you want.
That's what
That
you
is
want.
absolutely what you want. Because if you have a team that collaborates together and gets the problem solved, and you as the leader only have to get involved when stuff really gets bad. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't still walk around the floor, and or if you're virtual, pick up the phone and call your team members, at one point all of them throughout the week, and make sure you're asking how you can support them, and if there is a problem, and how you can assist them in whatever, difficulties they're dealing with at that time. You should still do all of those things. I'm not saying that needs to stop. You don't just leave from the office and forget about what they're doing because they got it. No, 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 no.
Right.
You don't step on their toes, but you still offer assistance, because one of these times they might say, JJ, I have been dealing with this, or Chris, I have been dealing with this, and I do need your assistance with this. And then that's an opportunity for you to build up that emotional piggy bank, that leadership capital, whatever you want to call it, and go
Leadership
out there.
capital, baby.
Leadership capital, baby. I
That's
think
right.
that's a Jocko thing, to be quite honest with you.
It
But
is.
but that's when you go out there and you can build up some of that trust. And that trust, the more you build, then when we as humans, us fallible people that we are, go make a mistake later on, it's not going to damage your value to the team,
Right.
because you're providing value on a regular basis, and you're bleeding into them, and you're showing them that you care about them. And then they don't care when you make a mistake every once in a while, because you've already let them make their mistakes and then learn from them. So, you just, there's such a balance here. And chaos, it it brings out who you really are, and whether you like it or not, sometimes that's good and sometimes that's bad. So that's kind of the whole leading through conflict thing. And so we're kind of at the end here. Chris, do you have any closing comments that you want to throw out there? And anybody who's listening here, I see we got a few people throughout the platforms. If you have a question, since we're at the end of the program here, please let us know. But what closing comments do you have, Chris?
Yeah, what I would say is you have to be comfortable in conflict. And that could mean taking up hobbies that put you in uncomfortable situations. Like, um, you've heard me say many times that when I was a young idiot, I would do X, Y, or Z. And one of those things is I was always up for a conflict. When I was a young man, like, I'm your classic like bull in a china shop. And I would jump in, I would want to like roll up my sleeves, sometimes in a bad way, right? I would raise my voice, I would yell, all of the things that are wrong,
Yep.
right? And then, it's because I just by nature, I don't shy away from conflict. Maybe it's the Gen Xer in me. I don't know. Um, but then you start training jujitsu and you're like, okay, I have conflict 3 nights a week on the mat. and I'm comfortable with it, but I know how to deal with it. I know how to take a breath when things are getting too tough, and I know how to reassess in a fast moving dynamic, situation. So if you can find maybe some hobbies, if you are that kind of person who just like avoids conflict, find something that you can embrace that helps you to really say, okay, this isn't so bad. Let me figure this out. Go to Toastmasters, learn how to speak, right? Learn how to speak in front of people. That's another, I think, problem that folks have is they don't know how to communicate clearly or draw out what those root causes are in order to solve a problem. So embrace conflict. It doesn't always have to be contentious.
No, doesn't. Now, if you, hopefully you have a couple extra minutes, Terrence
Yeah.
actually did. He asked a question, so I'll address it first here. But he said, "How do you deal with ongoing personality conflicts?" Well, first of all, I'm going to say, hopefully in your on your team, you've built up that trust capital. That's what it takes. They need to get used to you as not just that person that gets involved when something gets crazy or deals with them when they've done something that you don't like, but also that you're that person that is regularly asking how you can assist. One thing that people overlook on a regular basis, and I'll get to your actual answer here in a second because it's more complicated than just dealing with an ongoing personality conflict. So it once you have trust with a person and you build up a rapport with a specific person, dealing with a personality conflict is a professional development moment. And
Mhm.
and it can be one, it can be many, but they have to, you have to get rid of that intimidation factor. Whether we like it or not, as a manager, supervisor, director, VP. I don't know what your status is there, Terrence, but I will say that when you have that position of authority, you are automatically intimidating because they know at some point if they do the wrong thing or if they tick you off or if they say something you don't like, they could lose their job. And so that's what's running through a lot of people's mind. And that can cause some of those personality conflicts. But once you've built that trust up, I would say that, it's when you take them off to the side and let them know that there is a personality conflict, whether it's how they deal with one of their fellow employees or how they deal with you or how they deal with customers, then likely it's going to be a lot more productive. And that's what you want. You don't want them to come into your office and be defensive or submissive because if those two situations are happening, then whatever conflict they have when they leave is still going to continue, and everything that you say to each other in the room is going to go in one ear and out the other. So I would say make sure that if you don't already have that trust, that leadership capital that we talked about, make sure that you try to build it and bring them in and say, hey, look, just uh, Terrence, what's going on in your world? How are things going with you? I've noticed that things are out of sorts. You ask open-ended questions that make him open up, he or she open up, so that you can get to the root cause. If you have the trust, the conversation's going to be easier. If you don't have the trust, then you gotta ease your way into the conversation because if this person already has a personality conflict, whether it's not engaging enough with others or over engaging, being aggressive in some sort of a way, then you're not going to be able to get to the root cause of that unless you ask open-ended questions and coach them through whatever's happening in their situation. It's harder when you don't have that capital already built. But Chris,
You know,
what's your take on it?
yeah, I'll jump in with a different angle here. If it's an ongoing personality conflict, that's where you've got to evaluate, like, is this person really a culture fit for our organization? Because everybody has different personalities, right? But if you have a culture fit, then the chances of those ongoing personality conflicts are minimized. So if that's where you really have to step back as a leader and say, okay, what are our core values? And is this person constantly in violation of one or more of our core values? And if so, then that person probably has to go. Like, let's
Yeah.
not dance around this. We're talking about conflict here. But, when you have one person that is just toxic to the group, and they're the source of the conflict on an ongoing basis, and they claim it's personality, like, oh well, so and so is just like a bear with a sore ass all the time. Well, you know what? You can't sacrifice the entire team for one person's personality. And
No.
especially if there's not a culture fit, then sometimes the tough decision has to be made to let that person go. And you'd be surprised how happy the rest of the team is when you get rid of that one toxic individual.
Yeah.
Like they can cause people to leave because leadership is turning a blind eye to just chalking up to that's how so and so is. Well, look, if everybody around you has the same thing to say about the one person, that's your root cause and they need to be shown the door.
Yep. There's always a process to this, Terrence.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, if you identify it as if it's not typical and it's a new development that you haven't addressed in a while, and it's not the way that person has always been as a member of your team, then I believe, I come from the military. So this is how we handle everything. You teach, you coach, you mentor. So you talk. The first thing you do is you bring them in, you do a counseling. The thing we were talking about before. Hey, what's going on? I've noticed a difference in your personality. Notice that there's a difference in the way you're handling things, and you talk to them about it. If they're having an issue, you can maybe teach them how to handle a problem. Maybe if that's possible. Maybe it's not possible. Maybe there's a personal situation that's going on in their life that it might take a little bit of time for them to come down from. That's fine. That we all have that stuff. We're human. So again, we're fallible, just like we talked about earlier. The next step is if there's a way for you to assist them through that personality conflict, then you coach them through that. You bring them in multiple times and you try to say, hey, look, how is this working for you? What's going right? What's going wrong? What can we do differently? So on and so forth. And coach them through that. Make them answer the questions. Don't tell them what they need to do. Ask them questions and coach them through it. And if that works, then you go to the mentorship stage, which is where you were before the conflict even happened. And you just check in with them once in a while. Hey, how are things going? I noticed things are a little bit better, but I just wanted to make sure you're good. And then you go to what Chris was talking about. Sometimes that's an inevitability. You have to protect your culture. You have to, because one bad apple can ruin the whole bunch. And that's not just a saying, that is the absolute truth. So if it gets to the point where what may have been a really good guy or gal at one point is just causing problems with the entire team, and you've addressed it, you've tried to help them through it, but it just persists and persists, it could be that they're just not a great fit for your team. And guess what? Don't feel bad for that person. There could be their team out there that they would fit well with, just not with the culture that you have built on your team. And allow them to go explore other opportunities. At the end of the day, you have to you got to keep the ball rolling on your team. And if you keep something rotten on your team, it's going to spread.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I'm not saying that person that you may be talking about is rotten. I'm not saying that at all. But if they're not a good fit because they're causing problems consistently, then they might just have to go.
Yep. Exactly.
Yep. And that might not be the answer you wanted, but at the end of the day,
There are
sometimes
layers.
there are layers. At the end of the day, sometimes someone's not a good fit, but you should always take an ownership perspective to it first. What can you do as a leader to help solve that problem? But you can't always solve everything.
Right.
You can't. You just can't. And I don't really think there's anything else to say about conflict. I think you summed it up well. We beat the dead horse, and so we'll move on. Let me pull up the calendar here, because next time we are going to talk about.
That's a good one. The next one's a good one, JJ.
It is your leadership identity. Who are you when no one's watching? So we're going to be talking about integrity.
Yep.
We're going to be talking about who you are. And we touched on it this call, but we're going to go in depth with it next time. So that's great. I'm looking forward to that. For those of you who are watching, by the way, thank you, Terrence, for participating today. We encourage that with our audience, but for those of you who catch it later, that's okay too. You know, not everybody can be up bright and early on a Saturday, and we appreciate that. But make sure you like the video if you actually do like it. Subscribe if you're on my YouTube or my Spotify or Apple, whatever. I have podcast stuff all over the doggone place. But the most important thing is to comment below. Let us know what you like or what questions you have, and share this with your audience if it resonates with you enough to pass the message along. But anyway, we will see you all next time, and don't forget to buy my book, Speak Up, Show Up, Lead, on Amazon.com. Adios.
Have a great day. See you in 2 weeks.